Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. Welcome to the Metro Chicago Assembly Orientation. It's great to have you all here. We hope the next hour or so will help you feel more comfortable using the technology we'll be using for assembly. Some introductions to get started. First of all, my name is Jim Valentine, and I'll be your host and key presenter for the hour. Daryl Thompson-Powell is with us from the nominating committee, so he'll be presenting that report. And my tech support and chat monitoring today is done by Mr. Tom Anderson from the Senate office and Mr. Bob Shorty. Thank you, Bob and Tom, for doing that. Here are our goals for today. We want to briefly outline the Senate agenda for you so you have a sense of that. We want to review some of the key rules and procedures of the Assembly. We will explain how you check in on June 5th. You'll get an update from the nominating committee from Daryl. We're going to explain how we do voting at Assembly, both through a system called eBallot and also from using the polling feature in Zoom. We also hope to answer any questions you have as we go along. This year's Senate Assembly will dwell on the theme, Good Stewards. It's based on 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 10. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gifts each of you has received. Our theme invites us to reflect on God's grace and goodness and to move us to see our giftedness as we strive to serve our neighbor and one another. While this year's gathering is going to be in an all-digital format, it'll seem new and different. Our Assembly's purpose remains the same: to gather together in faith as representatives of the congregations of our Senate, to conduct the necessary business and celebrate our shared mission. Our shared mission is, say it with me, in Jesus' name, proclaim the gospel, make disciples, do justice. Before we get much further, an apology. For those of you who may need Spanish language translation or sign language interpretation, we are not doing it for this orientation session. However, we are recording this, and those of you who struggle with those issues, call the Senate office this week and they'll find a way to translate the orientation for you. We are recording this presentation today as well, so let's keep it clean and civil as we go along. We will be offering Spanish language and sign language for the deaf during the Senate Assembly on June 5th. You will see this symbol called interpretation on the bottom, or in some cases on the top of your Zoom screen. And at Assembly, if you click on that, it will make the translation available to you. Okay, let's move on and take a look at the Senate agenda. My apologies. Here's a really brief overview of what's going to happen on June 5th. You'll notice that there's really two assemblies in one here. After an opening litany, since we did not have an assembly in 2020, we will briefly pause to reflect on the challenges, anniversaries, and celebrations of that year. This might feel a little strange to you to go through an opening and closing of an assembly in 10 minutes, but this is necessary constitutionally and also to recognize the happenings of 2020. But then we'll move on to the business for this year. It includes elections, reports, approval of the budget, some constitutional changes. You'll note we're not listing any specific times in this agenda. That's different than in the past. In on-site assemblies, we give you a very detailed agenda with breaks laid out in at the times of every single issue. We're not going to do that for this one. We hope to have the entire assembly over in 3 to 3.5 hours. We won't be taking breaks as we go through this. If you need a break, just put yourself on pause and shut off your video. Use the restroom, get a cup of coffee, do whatever you need to do, but we will continue right on until the business is done. I want to remind you that while this is online, it is still an assembly. We will still accomplish the business of the Senate. We won't be doing any breakout sessions. It will be all in one plenary. So no workshops, no hearings, no conference meetings like in the past. For those of you who are a 40-year veteran of conventions and assemblies, this is going to feel really strange. But we hope you'll roll with it because we still have business to do. Also, one blessing of being able to do this online is you can not have to travel an hour to get there, and you can do it in your pajamas if you want to. So count your blessings. We want to talk for a little bit about some of your responsibilities in getting ready for this assembly. You need to arrange for your technology and an internet connection to participate. Voting members will need a stable internet connection. Now, hopefully you have that today. Hopefully your screen isn't freezing. Hopefully you can hear me and I'm not fading out. Hopefully you can see the screen in front of you. You will also need to have your own unique email address for this assembly. Husbands and wives can't share them. You each need your own if you're each going to vote. So hopefully when you registered, you provided us with your own email address. We want to talk a little bit about the device you use for this assembly. My guess is some of you are on iPads today. A few of you I can see are doing this on your telephones, your cell phones. We really would like to encourage you to try to get yourself a desktop or a laptop computer for the assembly. Both the Zoom app and the eBallot app we'll be using work better on computers than they do on other devices. If you really have to use your cell phone, you can make it work, but it's just going to be a little more challenging. The chat session today is used for your questions. If you have any questions as we're going along, write them in the chat room. Bob and Tom will either answer your questions right there in the chat, or they'll alert me that there are questions that I need to answer verbally. While I pause to get a drink of water, Bob and Tom, are there any questions we need to deal with at this point?
I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, I think they're covered for now.
Cool. Let's hope I'm being perfectly clear and just not confusing people so much they don't even know what to ask. So we'll see as we go here. Let's then move on. Credentials, that's just a fancy title for voter member checking in. If we were gathering in person, you'd walk into a building, you'd walk up to the check-in desk, you'd announce your name, they'd give you a name badge and a packet of materials, and you'd be checked in. It's a little different when we're checking in online. So here are the steps. 1, you need to register by May 24th. I'm hoping most of you are already registered, but if you have not registered, go to the Senate website before May 24th and register for the assembly. Registered voting members will receive a confirmation email almost immediately after you register. As soon as you click register, something should appear in your inbox saying, thank you for registering for the assembly. If you didn't get something like that, you might want to call the Senate office and make sure your registration went through. Registered voting members are also going to receive a Zoom link to join the June 5th assembly. You haven't received that yet. It won't be sent out till Monday or Tuesday of the week before. If you do not receive that link by June 2nd, which is Thursday of that week, please contact the help desk phone number, which will be available on the Senate website. Call the help desk and say, hey, I didn't get my Zoom link. Look around in your email for this. Some of you, depending on how you've set your spam filters on your email, will maybe get this in your spam folder or your junk folder. So if you don't see it in your inbox, check there. A note on the help desk phone number. We are not going to publish that until the first week in June. So I don't have that phone number for you now, but it will be available starting June 1st or 2nd. Here's a little more about the check-in process on June 5th. Now, this is going to be really different than that walk up to the table in the entrance of a convention center. Each voting member will receive a link to get them into the Zoom platform. I mentioned that earlier. You'll be sent that early in the week. Only one device will be allowed to connect via that link at any one time. Do not share that link with anyone else. If you have a friend that says, oh, I didn't get mine, I wonder where it is, don't say, oh, I'll just send you mine. Tell them to call the help desk and get their own. Check-in will begin on June 5th at 7 a.m. So go to bed early the night before. We will have close to 700 people to check in before 8:30 a.m. We've never done this before. We have no idea how long this is going to take. So when you get ready to check in that morning, I encourage you to do it as soon as possible. Don't wait till 8:30. That's too late. Get up early, open your computer, use your Zoom link to sign in. Once you're signed in, you can just put your computer on pause, go get a cup of coffee, take a walk, do whatever you want, but at least then you're checked in and ready to go. Any questions on the check-in process on the 5th?
Hey,
I want to show you what the screen will look like when you hit on that Zoom link. You'll get a screen that looks something very similar to this, which was similar to what you saw today, correct? You got this screen, and then you had a choice to join by using your computer audio. Hopefully you clicked on that. And after you did, you were placed in a waiting room. And so you got a screen that looked something like this, right? And you sat in that waiting room until Tom or Bob looked over your credentials and said, oh, this is somebody I'm supposed to let in. And then they let you in from the waiting room. The same thing will happen on Assembly Day. We'll have a crackerjack team of techs who will be waiting for you to click on your link. Once you're in the waiting room, they will allow you to move on into the Senate platform for the assembly. Once you enter the virtual assembly, mute yourself and stop your video till we're ready to start. There is no reason for us to see you in your bathrobe walking back and forth in your kitchen for an hour and a half. Just turn your video off, turn your sound off, and go about your business until a few minutes before 8:30 when the bishop calls us to order. This is the bottom of your screen, or maybe for you it's on the top of your screen. If you haven't already experimented with this, try it now. Stop your video, start your video, mute and unmute yourself so you know how to do that. Bob, I want to turn it over to you for a few minutes to tell these folks about some other Zoom instructions so that they can see their view better on the screen. Can you give them some advice, Bob, on how to do that?
Sure. Depending on how your screen is initially set up, it's normally either right at the top in the middle or just off to the side, and it's to the right side, and it's called View Options. If you click your mouse on View Options, it will ask if you want to see a slide-by-slide mode, or if you want to see a participant mode, or if you want to see the gallery, things like that. We recommend that you look at the gallery, at the participant. Do not look at the gallery, because when you have 700 people, it's crazy. and you'll lose the content. You won't be able to see the slides as well. So that's one of the things. The other thing there would be a selection of fit to window or full screen. You don't want full screen. You'd prefer to have your fit to window. And yeah, and one way the escape button on your computer will get you out of full screen if you can't find the view options. When you exit full screen, you'll be able to see, it's easier to see the chat room and things like that. So that's why we recommend those settings. I think
Thank you, Bob.
Yep.
I've put a screen up now showing you what your screen will look like once you're seeing the main presentation. That guy doesn't look much like the bishop, but the bishop will be on the screen similar to that. You'll see a chat feature. You see it down here. Some of you are already using the chat. Thank you for typing your full name into the chat session. If you haven't done it yet, do it now, so you learn how to do it on the day of assembly. Also use the chat chat feature for many other things, and we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Here are the final steps to checking in. Type your full name, as I just said, right in the chat feature. If you haven't done that today, please do it right now so you've practiced. Type your name into the chat. Say hi to everybody. This helps us credential you so our techies can compare that to the registration list and say, oh yes, we're supposed to let Tom in. Give him his voting rights. Also, you'll notice beneath your screen view, your name is over there in the left-hand corner. My name is Jim Valentine, and you should be able to see that if you're looking at my screen. Does your name on your screen match the name you registered with? Does it match what you put in the chat feature? Hopefully it does. I see many of you have just your first names listed there. That's okay for today, but on the day of the assembly, we'd like your full name written down there. That way, if we call on you to speak or you have a motion to bring up, you can easily be identified. Once you've done all that, now's the time to go ahead and get yourself a cup of coffee and wait for the bishop at 8:30 to start the assembly. Tom and Bob, anything in the chat room we need to deal with at this point? I don't think so, but thought I'd ask.
I think we're up to date, I believe.
All right, good. Okay, we're going to stop talking about technology for a few minutes and instead talk about rules and procedures, everybody's favorite thing about assembly. Assembly uses Robert's Rules of Procedures, and because of that, there's several things our parliamentarian will be helping the bishop and other presenters stay on top of to keep everything fair and above, and fair and fair. I'll just stop right there. Every assembly has rules like this. It's one of the first things we'll vote on when the bishop calls us to order. All these rules are published in the book of the reports where you can see them. The main rules I've put on the screen here. You'll notice we won't be able to start until we have our quorum met. You'll notice that proxy and absentee voting is not allowed. So only the online voting we'll be doing through the polling feature, and the e-ballot will qualify for voting at this assembly. If you're going to make a motion during this virtual assembly, you must submit it in writing. You do that in the chat feature. I would encourage you, if you have something on your mind you want to bring before the assembly, write that out in a Word document ahead of time so you have it ready and you can copy and paste it right into the chat session. The Zoom moderator will forward your chat motion that you've written down to the bishop. The bishop will then call on you to speak. So you'll need to unmute yourself, and at that point, kind of wave your hand so the techies can find you and put you on the screen, and you'll be allowed to say your motion out loud. If it needs a second, the bishop will call for one, and then we will discuss and vote on it. If you want to speak to any motion, or if you have anything you need to bring up at any time, again, the only way to do that is to write it in the chat feature. Don't wave your hands wildly thinking someone's going to call on you. It ain't going to happen. Write it in the chat. The techies will see it and pass it on to the bishop. When you are speaking and the bishop calls on you, make sure you unmute yourself. So practice that unmuting as you go. And when you speak, the general rule in Robert's rules is that somebody is allowed to speak in favor of the motion. And then the next person who speaks has to be somebody who speaks opposed to the motion. And that goes back and forth until discussion is closed. So that's the procedure we'll use for making motions and getting the bishop's attention during the assembly. Once again, the way to do that is what? Write it in the chat session. Don't go wave or unmute yourself and say, hey, I need your attention now, buddy. Don't do it. Okay, are there any questions about rules and procedures at this point?
Hey, Jim, Pastor Kopka had a question about making motions in Word. Only motions in Word accepted, but the idea is to get the motion into the chat, right?
Exactly. What I meant by writing it out in a Word document ahead of time is then you have it handy. If you have that Word document also up on your screen, you can copy and paste those words right into the chat, rather than having to type them at the spur of the moment as you go. Obviously, there are things you will have to do spur of the moment if you're reacting to somebody else's motion. But if you're bringing something ahead of time, it would be really good to be prepared, have it in writing, and then copy and paste it into the chat. That's all I meant by having it in a Word document.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to be voting at assembly in two different ways. When we vote on elections, which we'll talk about later, we're going to use something called e-ballot. A little more complicated than we've ever done in the past, but we'll explain that later. But simple yay, nay votes will be done using what's called the polling feature. The polling feature in Zoom. These polls will be set up ahead of time, so when the bishop says, who's in favor of adopting this agenda? The poll will come up on your screen. You'll vote on it. It will get tabulated, and the bishop will then announce the results. We're going to try this right now. Let's hope this works. Here is a poll. I'm going to launch it, and you should see this on your screen right now. This is a single vote ballot. You can vote yes, no, or you can abstain if you don't want to vote on it. I will give you 10 more seconds to cast your vote. Bishop will probably give you more time, but I want to keep things moving along today. It looks to me like almost everyone's voted. It says 49 of the 55 of you have voted. I'm going to end the poll right now. If you didn't vote already, too late. I've ended polling. Now you should see a screen showing the results. The results will be shown. Look at 47 of you, 92% have said you think the Senate should provide dark chocolate during these meetings. I don't know how we would do that virtually, but boy, I need some right now. 6% said no, and 2% or one person voted to abstain. See how that worked? It wasn't so hard, was it? We all figured out how to do it? All right, I am, I'm going to launch another poll at this point. This one is actually different than what we'll be doing at assembly because it's multiple choice. You can choose as many of these answers as you want. But I thought we'd do this right now just to see how you're retaining what we've taught you so far. I'm launching the poll right now, and I will give you 1 minute to answer these questions. 31 of you have voted. I'll give you 10 more seconds to finish voting. You'll note that it doesn't matter how many of the answers you chose, your vote doesn't count until you click the button at the bottom that says, what does it say? Submit? I don't see it, so. Submit vote, or what does it say at the bottom of the screen? Anybody tell me?
End polling.
End polling, okay, very good. I still only have 31 people who have voted here. I'll give you a few more seconds. You may note if your poll goes off the bottom of your screen, there's a little gray bar on the right side of it. You can pull that gray bar down so that you can see what's down below. Well, I'm still stuck at 31 people voting, so I don't know what the rest of you are doing, but I really want to move on.
Hey, Jim.
Yes, Bob.
I'm watching in the chat, and people are having trouble. Some lost the poll. Some said that it locked up when they tried to hit submit. Things like that. So possibly relaunch this one again.
All right, I'm going to relaunch this one again there, just in case the trouble was on our end. All right, we're starting over. There's your new poll. If your computer is freezing up while you're doing a poll, I'm guessing it's at your end. Yeah. How many windows do you have open on your screen right now? Hopefully you only have the Zoom app and maybe your email open. But if you have lots of other things, other documents open, other things you're working on, you're also surfing the internet while you're doing this, I need your total attention here. Oh, yeah. We're up to 46 people this time. That's much better.
Yeah. And if you are having a connection problem with Zoom, turning off your video does help because your video camera uses up the Zoom pipeline. It fills up the pipeline. And frankly, we don't need to see you, you need to see us and the bishops. So
right.
Turning off your camera will help.
All right, I'm ending the poll right now. I'm going to share the results. We're going to walk through them a little bit. Opening Zoom from an email link, almost everybody said they're okay with that. Muting and unmuting themselves, everybody's okay with that. Turning my video on and off, again, almost everybody. Changing my screen name, less of you know how to do that. If you look at your screenshot photo, up in the right-hand corner, you should see 3 little dots. If you click on the dots, it gives you an opportunity there to rename yourself. So that's where you go to rename your screen name. Changing my view from gallery to speaker, it's 90%, that's not too bad. Adjusting the size of the presentation, again, 90%, not too bad. Looks like most of you know how to use the chat feature at this point. Having both Zoom and email open on your desktop at the same time, that's a little more of a challenge for us. Bob, would you like to right now talk about that with folks and help them through that? Because that's going to be very important during assembly.
Yes. When I was talking about not being in full screen view of Zoom, this is the key reason why. Because if you take your mouse and you cursor down to the bottom, it brings up your computer taskbar and it shows you what applications you have open. And this is where you click between your current application, which right now is the Zoom meeting, or your email, or eBallot, when eBallot is up and running. So you need to have access to the computer taskbar at the bottom of your window or your screen to be able to jump from one function to the other. Hopefully.
And again, that's your computer taskbar, not the Zoom taskbar.
That is correct. That is correct.
All right, good. Well, we'll play with that some more. Moving along. Well, I'm going to stop talking for a while and turn things over to Daryl Thompson Powell, who is the chair of the nominating committee. We'll talk about how we're going to vote later, but first you need to know about the nomination process and the stages of that. Daryl, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thanks, Jim. And my apologies to folks if you hear a lot of background noise. Happens to be spring cleaning day at the church that I serve at. And so that's happening outside of my office, and it's a wonderful thing. Just makes a little bit of noise. So one of the big things that we're going to be voting on at the assembly is vice president and secretary. These are done different than the other votes because these are done by what we refer to as ecclesiastical ballot. Technically it's not, but that's what we refer to. It's the same type of balloting we do when we elect a bishop. So no nominations can be taken from the floor, in advance from this. All nominations must be taken from the floor. Let me repeat that. No nominations can be taken in advance. All nominations must be accepted on the floor for vice president and secretary, which means you can, as voting members, you can nominate whoever you want for the positions. Vice president, constitutionally, must be a lay person. Secretary can be lay or rostered. Now, here's one key thing in the midst of all of this is that before you nominate somebody, you need to have their permission. And you'll see about that and how that nomination form is going to look like in a little bit, but you must have their permission first and have information. That means you can talk to someone in advance. You can talk with someone if you know someone at your congregation or you think your pastor would be good as the secretary. You can talk with them in advance, get their permission to nominate them, but you don't nominate them until you actually get to the floor, until we are actually in the assembly. So that will be one thing. And we will have, unless there's a majority of votes on the first ballot, of the nominating ballot, we will have multiple votes until we get a majority constitutionally so that we have an elected vice president and an elected secretary. Now, the other things that we are going to be voting on will include the 2022 Churchwide Assembly, Senate Council, the Committee on Consultation, and the Committee on Discipline. For the Churchwide Assembly will be in Columbus, Ohio in August of 2022. Anyone can be nominated for this. We include lay, rostered. We have 15 representatives from Metro Chicago Synod, plus the bishop and the secretary. And so you will see this list of names and possibilities. Now, we have quite a few, and all of the different slots are available. We are intentional. One, because of the Constitution, and the other is because we want to make sure everyone is represented. We're intentional on putting people in different spots. So when you see the ballot, you may see somebody who's running unopposed in one slot, and then in another slot, you're going to see two people listed. And you're wondering, well, why is there just one there and two here? We're intentional in that each conference is able to nominate a person to represent their conference at the Churchwide Assembly. And so if we have a conference person nominated, we do not run two people from two different conferences against each other. We want to make sure each conference is representative. Now, if we have a nomination from the conference and then somebody else from that same conference is nominated, those two people may be on the same, in the same slot. But if it's somebody from a different conference, they're going to be somewhere else. And of course, we need to make sure with all of our elections that we have representation of male, female. We also need to make sure that the proper balance between lay and rostered leaders. And then again, as I just mentioned a moment ago, we want to make sure all the conferences are represented as well. So if you know anyone who would be interested in going to the church-wide assembly in 2022, please nominate them. You'll see the link for that in just a moment. A question that came up recently that we didn't realize we needed to make clear to everyone, that I want to make clear now. For those who are elected to go to the church-wide assembly, they don't have to pay anything. The ELCA covers all of the costs, that is travel costs, hotel costs, and food for the time at the assembly. So, don't think, oh, I can't afford to go. If you can have the time off and you're interested in that, please nominate you or somebody else for it. Senate Council is also where we are electing a number of folks. The Senate Council has a range constitutionally as to how many people can be on the council. There's a minimum and then there's a maximum of 24. And so we have enough folks to reach the minimal number needed. However, we need more folks nominated because it tends to be right now a lot of rostered leaders, and we could definitely use some more lay people who would to be on Senate Council. And it tends to lean more towards one or two conferences as opposed to being represented from all of the conferences. So if you know someone who would be interested in running for Senate Council, being on the ballot for Senate Council, the Senate Council is a 4-year term that begins on September 1st of this year and runs for 4 years. So we hope that you will consider that as a possibility as well. The Committee on Consultation is one that, again, has a range in terms of the number of people that can be a part of it. We could also use some more lay people on that as well. So if you're interested in, or know somebody who might be interested in the Committee on Consultation, what that is if a congregation requests some assistance or help in the midst of something that's going on, the Committee on Consultation may have members who go to be a part of that to help a congregation, to consult with a congregation to help them move through whatever difficult times they may be having. The Committee on Discipline, that's one where we really could use your help with some additional people for. Right now, it is very much leaning male, white, and rostered for the Committee on Discipline. And so we encourage, if you know somebody who's be on that, that is a 12-member committee constitutionally. It needs to be 6 lay and 6 rostered people. It needs to be equal male and female. And so the Committee on Discipline is used when there is an issue with a rostered leader that may be facing disciplinary actions. And so then the bishop can bring in, if there is a problem where the rostered leader has decided they don't want to just resign, the Committee on Discipline is brought in to basically act as a jury, for lack of a better word, to determine if that rostered leader did do something an action that was definitely a disciplinary action or not, before moving forward with what happens with that rostered leader. So again, important committee to have a part of and to have people with and things. So nominations are still, as I said, being accepted for all of these voting members during this time. And from all voting members during this time. And you can see the web address for there. It's an online form that you can fill out for people. There's also PDF versions that you can download and fill out as well. But if you can, do the online version. All right, Jim, back to
Daryl,
you.
thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Daryl? Daryl, I'm glad you mentioned your workday. I'm having one here too. Right outside my window, there are people planting flowers, and I have people walking on the roof over my head as they're doing a paint job up there. I understand. No questions for Daryl?
No,
Thank you, Daryl, for being with us.
Nothing in the chat, Jim.
All right, very good. Well, now we're going on to really have fun. We're going to talk about this e-ballot system I keep telling you about. When it's time for us to vote on all these elections that Daryl just described, the bishop will announce that a ballot is open. For example, vice president. I now declare the first ballot for vice president to be open. When he says that, one of our crackerjack techies will be sending you an email at that very moment with a link to your e-ballot voting system. So you're going to need to have your email open and active at the same time you have this Zoom open. That's why what Bob was saying earlier is so important, that you know to have both open at once. And remember, if you don't see the link in your email, check spam, check junk, it may be sent there. If you still don't see it in your email, in the inbox, the junk box, the spam box, whatever it's called, call the helpline immediately. We'll have that number right on the screen for you. So if you're having problems, you call them and they can resend it to you. You cannot vote without getting that email. Bob, do you want to say any more at this point about having both screens open at once? Does anybody have any more questions about that? Or are we okay to move on?
I was having both screens open because there was a question on the dates for the churchwide assembly, but someone else found the information before me. Thank you, Pastor Daryl. So that would be August 8th through 12th of 2022.
One simple way to solve this problem of having both screens open at once is perhaps to use your computer for the Zoom meeting. And then if you can receive your email on your cell phone, keep that handy, check your email on your phone and do your voting on the phone rather than flipping screens back and forth. Some people are real good at that. I'm not. I'll probably use a separate device. When you get this email link to eBallot, it will give you a choice of voting. You'll get a screen that looks something like this when you click on the eBallot link. It will say ballot for vice president nomination. Vote now. Guess what? That little blue vote button, you're going to push on that. When you push on that button, you're going to get a screen that looks something like this. Now, we're still tweaking this, so it may look a little different, but I wanted to give you a sample of it at this time. You'll notice you'll need to put in your nominee's name, first and last name. You're going to need to press that button saying, yes, I've asked them for consent. You're going to be asked for the congregation this person belongs to. So make sure you know what congregation they belong to. And here's what's different on June 5th than today. There will also be a spot where you'll write down the congregation city that they belong to. Let's face it, we have 167 Trinity Lutheran churches. Which Trinity Lutheran church? Trinity Evanston, Trinity Montreal, or wherever they're from. The ballot for vice president will continue, and it will ask you to enter contact information for this person. Now, you've asked them ahead of time for consent, but we may just need to follow up with them later. So we need to have a phone number for that person. And then the final question in this first ballot for vice president will be additional information. You might put they're a pastor, they're a layperson, they're tall, dark, and handsome, so please vote for them. Whatever information you think you need to give us at that point to help describe this person, put it there. And then you can click on that blue continue button. And when you do click on the continue button, you'll get this screen. You will need to check the participant consent, saying, yep, I'm really a voting member. This is for real. I belong to this assembly. Once you've clicked on the participant consent, hit the submit button. When you hit the submit button, you'll get a screen that looks like this. Thank you for voting. You'll notice toward the bottom, you can just go back to the dashboard and start over, or you can click a button that says receipt. If you want a receipt for your voting that you can save, I'm not sure I'm going to care about that at that point, but this is what the receipt looks like. This proves that you really did fill out the ballot. It tells you the person's name. All the information you entered will appear right on this screen. That seemed pretty simple, didn't it? Here's the difference between a live assembly and this online one when it comes to this kind of voting. At a live assembly, we could probably do this whole ballot in less than 5 minutes. Pieces of paper are in your assembly folder. You write down the name of the vice president you want. The bishop declares the ballot closed after 3 or 4 minutes. The ushers, sergeant at arms, they collect all those votes and they go off to a room where Tom Anderson has a committee and they count them all up. This is the difference for an online. Voting itself won't take 3 to 5 minutes. It may take 10 or 15 minutes to collect everybody's votes because remember, you're getting sent an email, then you need to fill it out, and then you need to send it back. We need to have ample time for that to work. And since we have never done it before, especially this very first ballot, will probably take us a long time. So be patient. This is a good chance once you voted to go get another cup of coffee. I hear there's some fabulous videos that are going to be presented as well during voting so that once you voted, you can watch a great video on the ministries of our Senate. That's the difference between live. At the live time, it takes hours to count the votes. E-ballot will count the votes in 10 seconds. Once everybody has voted, we'll press a button and we will get results so fast, it'll make your head spin. Here's kind of a sample of what a ballot results screen will look like. We'll project this on the screen after the voting is done. Now for the vice president and secretary, instead of 2 names, you'll have the results of everybody who was nominated. So for those ballots, it'll look different than this. But for all the other votes, for the committees, the council elections, where 2 people are running against each other, you'll see a result that looks like this. The bishop will share that on the screen, and then position by position, he'll go through and declare a winner. That's the system for e-ballot. We'll do that over and over again, probably 2 or 3 times for the vice president, the nominating ballot, the second ballot where we'll narrow the field, and then a 3rd ballot to vote on a final candidate who will get a majority. Same for the secretary. We're hoping that the other ballots will just vote once. We don't think we have more than 2 people slotted for any of the various positions. So somebody should get a majority vote on the first ballot. I'll pause for questions. Bob or Tom, do you see anything in the chat regarding this system?
Yes, I do, Jim. Is filling out a nomination different than an actual vote?
Ooh, good question. Remember, Daryl was talking about an ecclesiastical type ballot, also called a nominating ballot. The difference is when you're nominating the person on that first ballot, we're starting from scratch. There will be no names presented by the assembly, by the bishop saying, hey, please vote for this first or second person. We start with 0. So for the first ballot, all of you, all 700 of you get to nominate somebody. Maybe you'll all nominate 700 different people, which means ballot number 2 will have a lot of people's names on it. But maybe it'll be somewhat less than that. We kind of hope it will be. That's what that's the difference between a nominating ballot and all of the other ballots. But it is an actual vote. Does that help?
Hey, Jim,
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know if we're set up for this. The question was, can we actually produce an email so we can try it? Not now.
No, we cannot do that right now. I'm very sorry. We have experimented with it as an assembly planning team. It seems to work really well. We won't be able to share it and try it with all of you until the actual day. That's why, like I said, that very first vote could take us a half hour or more to make sure everybody learns how to open their email, how to click on the link, and how to vote on that first vice presidential ballot. Pray hard, folks. It's worked in many other Senates. We are simply picking up technology that others have used and used well for many months during this time of pandemic.
So is this the time for final questions and things, or do you want to do your quiz first?
Well, I got one more quiz. This is a review
great.
quiz to help us. Let's see, final review quiz. This is a long one, folks. It has 10 questions. You should be seeing it right now. Nothing new is going to be said after this point. We're just going to be answering questions and going over this quiz. So if you think you've got it down pat, this would be a good time to sign off. Otherwise, we're going to take.
I wouldn't say that.
I know, we'll always have new stuff. But
questions coming in. So go ahead.
Very good.
Quiz, and then we'll hit the questions.
I'm going to give you 4 or 5 minutes to do this quiz. Don't sweat over it. But see if you can answer these questions. And remember, I said you're not going to be able to see it all on the screen at once. Right next to question 1, you should see on the right a tiny little gray bar. Pull that gray bar down so you can see all the rest of the questions.
It did not come up on my screen, and I'm seeing that in the chat line.
So
possibly relaunch this if you can. I see it.
All right, very good. Sorry about that. That was my error on my side. Good thing I won't be in charge of this on the actual day of assembly. On the first day at orientation, we played the Jeopardy music in the background, but it got really annoying. So we're going to just sit here in silence today unless somebody wants to sing. Hopefully you're on question 4 by now. Some of you are fast already. A few people have finished. Hopefully you're up to question 6 by now. 20% of you are already done. Hopefully you're up to questions 8 or 9 by now. I'm going to give you another minute. Two-thirds of you are done. Twenty more seconds. All right, I'm ending polling right now. Thank you for participating. And now I'm going to share the results. We'll quickly talk through this. All right, can you see the results? Hopefully you can. Yeah. What time should a voting member check into assembly? Oh, I'm so happy all of you said 7 o'clock or as soon as possible. That's the answer we wanted, folks. We really did. What happens if you fail to check in by 8:15? Hey, some of you Lutherans were really holding on to grace here. I'm sorry, no one is going to let you in if you haven't registered on time. You will not get to vote in the assembly if you don't register by the cutoff time. So change that answer by the time you get to assembly. A voting member is late and can't participate. Are there any other options? The gnashing of teeth, yes, certainly that will happen. But you can still watch the assembly because there will be a link on the Senate website to a Facebook Live event. The trouble with that is you're not allowed to vote through Facebook, only if you're on the Zoom event. If a voting member is having trouble getting into assembly using the Zoom link, what should they do? Pray is a good one. I'm surprised more people didn't say that. And cursing technology is a good one too. I'm surprised more people didn't pick that. But of course, the big thing is to call the help desk. Somebody just wrote on our screen. Question 5, things for voting members to do before assembly. You could have voted for any of these and all of these. I wish you would have, because all these are things that you should keep in mind before assembly starts. There's lots of reading to do, especially that one down here toward the bottom. If you haven't got your Zoom link by Thursday, call the Senate office hotline. Question 6, once a voting member checks in using Zoom link and is let in from the waiting room, which of the following things should they do? This was multiple choice. I'm glad most of you picked all 4 of these because all 4 of these are great ideas, especially the donut idea. I'm going to be doing that, covered with dark chocolate. If a voting member wants to be recognized by the chair, I'm so glad you guys said to type the motion into the chat feature. None of those other things will work. We're not going to help. You can't make a motion through the helpline. If you're having trouble using your chat feature, call the helpline. But otherwise, you got to type it in the chat feature if you want to be recognized. If a voting member wants to nominate someone, what are things they need to do? All of the above is the correct answer. We need consent. We need their full name. We need their church, city of the church, and contact information. Number 9, a voting member needs to get permission in advance. The answer is yes. Hey, those of you who voted on, I need to think about this in advance, question mark. Oh, I'm sorry. Part of your preparation for assembly is to think about all this in advance, so you come prepared. Voting for all candidates for all positions will be done by the e-ballot app, which means all of these things. The bishop will declare it open. You'll get an email. That link could be in your inbox, your spam box, or your junk folder. Click and check all places. Click on the link and follow the instructions to vote. And if e-ballot isn't working, call the helpline as soon as possible. The bishop will then declare voting closed. When tabulated, the results will be projected up on the screen. Well, folks, that just about wraps up our orientation for today. Bob and Tom, did you see any final questions?
Yeah, and I think that this probably is for Tom. How much material will be updated from the current book of reports? And when will that be available?
That is a good question. I am not aware of any additional reports going out, but I can check on that for you, Pastor Paul. And I'll let you know if there's anything else that's going out. But I thought that that everything else was included in the book reports as they were published.
I was told that yesterday, Tom. I was told that everything was finalized, the final book of report, the rules, the Constitution, all of that is already there.
But the question is Bishop Curry's report.
Oh, his oral report that he'll give?
That's going to be a separate video.
Yeah, that'll be a separate video. And we'll be recording and saving everything on the assembly, so you can watch that again and again in years to come if you would like to.
Okay. What I had noticed that a couple of our participants today are actually sharing their device. We have 2 or 3 people sitting together.
Hey, Christianity is all about sharing, Bob.
Well, is this good for our meeting? Can we
No.
do this?
No, not if you want to vote. If you're on the same device, you won't be able to use the Zoom voting poll. One of you will be able, but not 2 people voting at the same time on the same device. No, that doesn't work.
Okay. Is it mandatory to enter a name for nomination?
No, it is not mandatory. You will be given a chance to bypass that and say, I have no nomination. So you don't have to vote on that now.
Okay, final question I have. Oh, well, maybe not. Okay, there's something labeled as a draft. I'm not sure if we can address that here. Here's the final question that I saw. This budget hearing, what's it all about? Who's supposed to attend?
Mr. Anderson, you take that one.
Sure, I can take that one. It's open to everyone. And it'll be a Zoom meeting, of course. And the basic purpose of that is to answer questions on the budget, which is part of the book of reports. So it's not a recreation of the budget for the year, but it certainly is open for review. And Yvette Newberry-White, who is the treasurer of the Synod Council, will be doing a quick review of that and then opening up for questions. So it's really, anyone is welcome, especially with regards to any questions that you have after reviewing the budget from the book of reports.
Thank you, Tom. The bottom line is, folks, you all should go to that. Budgets are complicated, and they'll talk not only about the numbers, but you'll hear about the mission of the church and how those numbers support the mission of the church. So come to that if you possibly can. It'll be less than an hour, won't it, Tom?
Yeah, I'm sure, yes.
Yeah. Well, folks, we've gotten to the point of saying thank you for attending today. One last chance for questions if you have them. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate your partnership today.
You know, Jim, there's a couple of questions there about this draft issue with the book of reports. So we need to check on that. I haven't looked at it honestly recently. So let me look and see. I know the intention is to get the full report out there. So if it's still a draft on there, I would assume Monday or Tuesday next week, that will be updated and finalized.
All right, we'll confirm that early in the week, folks, but I was told it was finalized, so maybe it's finalized but not posted yet. So next week, maybe. Well, God bless you all as you continue to prepare for assembly. You got lots of reading to do, lots of thinking to do about who you want to nominate for those positions. Thank you for being with us today. Sorry we ran a little bit long, but I hope you got your questions answered. Have a blessed day. The tech team is going to hang around for a post meeting. So if you're on the tech team, please stay, but this is a good time for the rest of you to sign off. I'm going to stop the recording now too. Thanks again, folks, for being here.